It's very serious.
No, I didn't think we would get to this point.
I'm here to get some water.
In the cold now, let me see, what's the temperature? 30 degrees. You get some water.
It's horrible. I used to get up in the morning, take a shower, couldn't do that. I got a little bottle of water just to sprinkle on me to clean myself up.
I need drinkable water, water to bathe, water to cook. You don't realize how much you use water until you think about it.
Probably the most important thing that you need on a daily basis other than like shelter.
How long is it gonna take?
When can we get it water?
Grateful, thank Richmond City for these, but like I said, we don't know how long it's gonna be out.
So it's affecting everybody.
I mean, everybody needs water, it's essential.
Monday, January 6th at 7:30 in the morning, in the midst of a winter storm, a power outage occurs at the City of Richmond's water treatment plant off Douglasdale Road. Backup generators turn on, but officials say a separate battery backup and a redundant system both fail. That causes critical damage to the IT system that is the brains of the whole operation, and also leads to the filter gallery valves getting stuck, allowing water to flood into the basement where the equipment is located.
And so over the course of the morning, that's when that water level started to rise. And so our folks were in there, they were setting up pumps, they were trying to pump that water out.
By 9:39 a.m., power has been restored, but a crisis is emerging. Henrico and Chesterfield counties choose to disconnect from the plant, preserving water for the city. For the next several hours, crews work to get the plant's computer and mechanical systems back online. Richmond City officials begin to think about issuing a boil water advisory, but hold back, hoping that it is not necessary. But they soon realize the reservoir is dropping quickly and water consumption is increasing. In parts of the city, people begin to notice major issues with water pressure.
We got some water bottles just in case, just we had them.
By 3 o'clock, rumors are swirling on social media. Richmonders begin flocking to local grocery stores. Bottled water disappears from shelves. 4:26 p.m. The city announces an immediate boil water advisory, something that has not happened in Richmond since Hurricane Isabel struck in 2003. Richmonders are asked to begin conserving as much water as possible. 5:15 p.m., the mayor holds an emergency news conference.
We, at this point, have cleared out the flooding. We have addressed some of the issues. We have 8 filters that are up and running, and we expect by some time later this evening that we will resume the ability to produce water.
The goal is to have pressure restored to customers by 10 p.m. That time comes and goes. Shortly before midnight, the city provides an update saying the issues still have not been fixed and that Mayor Avula is spending the night at the water plant to oversee the restoration efforts. Overnight and throughout the early morning hours, CBS 6 is inundated with calls and emails from Richmonders desperate for answers. Tuesday morning at 8:15, the mayor provides an update.
As about 15 to 20 minutes ago, we have the most positive step we've had in the last 12 hours, which we actually have 2 pumps that are actively running, actively filling one of the tanks.
But still no water for much of the city. Then, at 12:33 p.m., the city announces that water production has been restored, but says it will take several hours before pressure is anywhere back to normal. Still, the question remains, was this preventable?
But, I've now been in this for, almost 24 hours, and it really seems like the power outage, the IT system, and then the dysfunction of the pumps really led to a weather-related incident that would be really hard to avoid.
State regulators are clear.
We don't want to see boil water advisories, and we don't want to see people without water pressure.
Dwayne Roadcap, who heads the Virginia Department of Health's Drinking Water Division, has already said it seems apparent that Richmond City did not comply with requirements that are in place to prevent this kind of crisis. City officials have blamed outages on a winter storm, knocking out power at the treatment plant, which triggered flooding. Backup systems kicked in, but they failed.
One of the things that we're looking into is why the fail-safe systems and the redundant systems didn't work, because you shouldn't have this kind of problem.
So on Wednesday, we took the questions that many have been asking to Mayor Danny Avula. Did DPU do everything it possibly could to prevent this crisis ahead of the storm? For example, did they test the backup systems before the storm? Did they ensure the reservoir was at 100% capacity? Was the plant being powered at 100% power capacity by both power sources? And essentially, was there a proper preparedness plan in place for this storm?
You know, I'm day 6 on the job. I'm not sure that I can answer that in any detail. I do know that our operation, on an annual basis is going through preparedness exercises. So that will also be a part of our after action report, looking at when was the last time that we, tested on a potential outage? What is our regular rhythm for testing battery backups?
We also pressed about this. CBS 6 obtained a 2022 audit of DPU's water system by the EPA, a federal regulatory agency. It cited Richmond with dozens of violations, including multiple corroded and deteriorated pumps at the main treatment plant, filters that were aged and cracked, inspections not being regularly performed, and limited preventative and corrective maintenance. I asked DPU Director April Bingham to respond. Did faulty equipment contribute to this crisis at all?
I think this incident here was simply caused by an outage to the plant. Certainly, as Mayor has said, the plant is 100 years old. We have aging infrastructure, and we have to continue to focus on investments in this infrastructure. I'm not going to combine the two because I can't right today say that they were connected.
The report further explained that Richmond, quote, does not perform tabletop emergency scenario planning exercises in the event of large-scale power failures, but sometimes participates in the fire department's activities. The EPA cited the city for having an emergency response plan that was outdated and not finalized. Though the audit occurred in 2022, Bingham did not provide the EPA a response until January 3rd, 2025, 5 days ago. In it, she highlights the scale and complexity of the facility, but says, quote, redundancy is a key feature of our system, ensuring that critical services remain uninterrupted despite the temporary unavailability of certain assets. 3 days later, that redundancy system would fail, causing a water crisis across Virginia's capital city and surrounding counties. And now I asked DPU why it took more than 2 years to respond to the EPA's report. A spokesperson tells me that they weren't presented with the findings until August of 2024. I'm following up with the EPA to verify that timeline, and we'll report back. Here in Richmond, I'm Tyler Lane for CBS 6 News.
Richmond Mayor Danny Avula says the water is now safe to drink throughout the region. But he says there's a lot of work still to be done to ensure that this never happens again. On the 6th day that Richmond residents didn't have safe drinking water, a celebratory mood at Richmond's main library.
We are back.
As the city's new mayor, Danny Avula, announced that Richmonders no longer needed to boil their water.
We have now had 2 rounds of clean test results confirming the safety of the water for human consumption.
For some of those 6 days, many Richmonders didn't have any water coming out of their taps at all after a power outage at the water treatment plant at 5:50 a.m. Monday morning led to multiple system failures, even triggering a devastating flood. Avula told us Thursday that when the power outage occurred, the plant attempted to automatically switch to a second power source provided by Dominion Energy, but the transfer switch failed. So a plant electrician was called in to help. As time was ticking, the electrician made their way into the plant and decided to manually try to switch over to the secondary Dominion power source as opposed to switching to backup generators, which also needed to be manually activated. He ultimately did restore power a little after 7:30 a.m. by switching to the secondary Dominion power source. But when that happened, the IT system, which runs the plant, did not reconnect to servers after a reboot. That IT system had backup battery power, but it went offline before power was fully restored. I've had so many engineers reach out to me questioning how this water plant was structured and the redundancies that were in place to ensure that power remained on there. Going forward, obviously there's a lot to be done, but how can you guarantee to people in the city of Richmond that this is not going to happen again, that there are redundancies in place right now so that this doesn't happen again?
The work of the week after that immediate getting everything back up and running period was how do we build redundancy, ordering extra backup batteries, testing and retesting the existing systems and backup generators, looking at our protocols, instituting walkthroughs in the plant on a regular basis, and then really increasing staffing numbers on all shifts. If there were to be another weather event or another electrical outage, we believe that we've got the people and the external expertise and consultants in place to help with an immediate response.
Noticeably absent from Saturday's press conference, DPU head April Bingham, who hasn't attended any of Mayor Avula's many press conferences about the crisis since Wednesday. Seems like a huge announcement. I'm wondering why the head of DPU is not here.
So she actually was all night, overnight at the water treatment plant. And so she went home this morning at 6 a.m. We make sure that everything's up and running. We'll have DPU and April be able to answer some questions directly for you next week.
In the meantime, the Virginia Department of Health's Office of Drinking Water, which regulates water plant facilities, is actively investigating what went wrong.
One of the things that we're looking into is why the fail-safe systems and the redundant systems didn't work, because you shouldn't have this kind of problem.
Mayor Avula said the city is already taking steps to have a third party conduct an independent investigation into what happened at the water treatment facility and help the city make decisions about what to do going forward to make fixes. In Richmond, I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6.
Did you ask for Ms. Bingham to resign?
You know, we have been obviously in deep response mode for the last 2 weeks, and then as we've started to restore service and figure out how we get the operation stabilized, starting to look at, okay, what skill sets do we really need moving forward? And I think in those ongoing conversations, April decided to step down.
And when you say that Ms. Bingham decided to step down, that was her own decision without you going to her and asking her to do that?
You know, we've been having conversations, and ultimately I can't get into the HR details of a conversation, but it was an amicable separation.
Through the response to last week's crisis, Avula says he found a replacement, Anthony Scott Morris, who has experience as a former director of water at the state level and as a leader and plant manager with Chesterfield Utilities. Notably, Morris is a licensed engineer, and Bingham was not. Was that like a distinction that you wanted to make in finding this next leader?
I think ensuring that we had somebody who was a professional engineer, and we have several who are on site and in the plant, but in quickly looking to find a replacement for April, finding somebody who could bring that expertise in the next phase of plant operations was a priority.
Do you think the previous administration put the wrong person into the role as DPU director?
I don't want to comment on that. I mean, I think there's so many things that April did so well, and even in the midst of our response, I mean, she was incredibly responsive, attentive, a really positive presence in our response.
The Department of Health has said this crisis was completely preventable. It should not have happened. To my knowledge, I don't think you have said that on the record yet. Can you answer that? Do you believe that this was completely avoidable?
Yeah, I don't know that to be true, and we're very close to bringing a third-party independent consultant in who will do the deep dive into, the blow-by-blow of what happened and where did systems fail and where did human response, where could that have been different? And I think at that point, I will be able to say with more certainty, could this have been avoided or could it not have? But I'm not there now.
So why do you think the state can be so confident about that and you are not? Because I'm sure you guys have probably a lot of the same information.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
To recap our previous coverage, we've learned from state officials that the plant was staffed with 3 operators when the power went off, which they say was not enough. They say DPU had one of its primary power sources turned off before the winter storm, likely did not test the backup systems to see if they were working, and that staff were not aware of a manual fallback procedure in the event that all of its systems failed. When you look at everything we've learned so far, I mean, is there anything you can identify that you wish would have happened differently?
Yeah, I think that any response like this is going to be a combination. I mean, clearly there were act of God issues here with a storm and a power outage. There do appear, as I understand it, to be infrastructure failures with the switchgear that didn't switch over. But then there's always going to be an element of human response.
Let's start at 4:25 a.m. when, as CBS 6 was the first to uncover, the plant experienced a short power outage that lasted a few seconds. Interim DPU Director Dr. Scott Morris said the consultants from HNTB who conducted an after-action review of the incident are investigating if that quick outage led to a critical failure at the plant that caused flooding within minutes of a complete loss of power at the plant at 5:45 a.m. Inside their preliminary report, questions are raised about a backup battery attached to the valves that need to be closed to prevent flooding. It says that there was a backup battery attached to those valves, but that the DPU staff didn't even know if that backup battery did what it was supposed to do or was capable of doing what it was supposed to do, which was to close the valves, to prevent flooding in the event that a loss of power occurred.
We're still investigating as part of the preliminary report, but it looks like there was a power blip earlier in the morning that caused the UPS to get depleted to some degree.
Licensed professional engineer Joel Polson says he believes the backup batteries might have turned on when that power bump occurred at 4:25.
It certainly is plausible that they could have been operating off of unstable main power and batteries trying to compensate, and eventually they ran out and all they were left with was the unstable power from the main power source at that time.
According to the report, when the plant lost power, its IT system also went down. Previously, Mayor Danny Avula said the backup battery for the IT system died after about 40 minutes. We are still working to get confirmation on if it actually worked at all. The plant was also equipped with at least one backup generator that needed to be manually activated that could be used to power the plant, but it wasn't. An electrical supervisor that was called to respond and arrived 45 minutes after the outage occurred opted to try to switch to a secondary power source from Dominion instead. So do you think, or would you recommend that staff have activated generators immediately upon the loss of power?
I believe they took the proper procedures in trying to restore power.
If they had only, just after 5:45, switched on the generators, they would have established secondary power until they could get that second feed up.
Yeah. So as part of this, those individuals that would hook up those same swap over from primary to second power are the ones that would swap over the generators as well. So those are the electricians. Those are the individuals that are on call.
Do you think during a storm event you should have somebody on site that can turn on a generator?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mayor Danny Avula says he expects the more comprehensive after-action report to be released in March. I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6.
It has been 8 strong weeks that I've been silent, that I've sat by the wayside and I've watched and I've listened, and I've actually experienced and witnessed a lot of misrepresentation of my skills, my abilities, and the events of that day. And so no longer can I sit beside and just wait for others to continue to write this narrative without me being a part of it.
Take me back to January 6th. When did you realize that there was a problem going on at the water treatment plant, and then walk me through what you did?
The night of the 5th, leading on the night of the 5th and early into the morning of the 6th, we had a weather call because we knew that impending weather was coming our way. And so I had not been briefed about anything going on or any concerns at the water plant or the wastewater plant or any other issues within DPU. It was after that call, that early AM call on the 6th, that I was notified by plant staff, the superintendent, that there was a flood happening at the water plant. And so when I got to the plant, I found a situation that was chaotic. I found a situation that was fearful. I found staff that was scared of the events that were taking place.
April Bingham says by the time she arrived, catastrophic flooding had already filled the basement, which halted water production. The power was out and the computer systems were offline. She says she called in extra staff, including electricians, experts, and engineers. And so how involved were you in figuring out the solutions?
There were no immediate answers, right? There was planning, right? So we needed to understand what we needed and how quickly we needed it and what we needed it for.
And so when did it click for you that we have a public crisis on our hands that we need to get ahead of?
The plant superintendent asked to speak directly with myself and the deputy director. And he said, we need to consider a boil water advisory at 10 a.m. Immediately thereafter, I contacted my boss to make sure that that information was passed forward. So I knew at 10 a.m. that we needed to move forward with next steps in planning for the region.
Who is your boss?
My boss is Sabrina Joy Hogg.
That's the interim chief administrative officer, the top manager of all city operations. As you're very aware, you have been criticized for a lack of communication. The counties have said that, the state has said that. They said by the time that they were aware of the severity of the crisis, they did not have time to properly respond and prepare. Do you feel like you dropped the ball on communication?
Absolutely not. My job in crisis management was to feed information back to the main library so that they could then share with the public. And that's what I did. I could not bring in resources, manage staff, take care of contractors, and feed the public.
She says Joy Hogg should have been responsible for sharing information with the counties. In response, a city spokesperson says many members of city leadership and staff were in regular contact with counterparts in other localities, as well as state agencies, contractors, vendors, and other subject matter experts as part of the response and recovery activities. They say their emergency communications are being reviewed by outside consultants in an effort to identify how to improve them in the future. You wouldn't change anything about how you handled communication?
No, I would not.
We also discussed the city's after-action reports, which were done by external engineering consultants with H&TB. They found DPU was unprepared and lacked training, standard operating procedures, and emergency planning.
It sounds like we were not prepared going into the winter storm, and we should have been. And so, again, if I'm on vacation and someone is preparing the plant for a winter storm, that is not my job. My job is to ensure that you're doing your job. I'm coming back off a vacation. I should have been briefed on all of that, and I was not.
But as director, wouldn't you have an oversight capacity to check in with your deputy directors and your plant superintendent and say, show me your plan, let me make sure that this is sufficient?
And that's a very valid question. And I will say that coming off a vacation, from December the 20th until January the 3rd, I did not check in with anyone to say, let me see your plan.
Do you think you should have checked in?
Well, in hindsight, maybe that's something that I would probably say could have happened. I won't run from that. But at the same token, I am not going to shy away from the individuals that are responsible for doing their job.
To that point, Bingham cited concerns with lower management that had more direct oversight of the plant.
I recognize that we have put people in positions that are greater than their skill sets.
Did you put any of those people in those positions?
Absolutely not. I inherited all of it.
If these issues were known to you prior to January 6th, wouldn't that say to you, I need to make sure that our plant can handle a disaster on January 6th because we are under a state of emergency, and I already know that we have problems with the management of this facility?
So let me say this, Tyler. When I took the role in December of 2021, there were a lot of fires to put out, right? And the plant at that time was not a fire. Customer service was a fire. Natural gas was a fire. Stormwater was a fire. And on January 6th, it is unfortunate that I was not aware of all of the coils that were bad, or the bus tie, or other things that have come out of the H&TB report. But I'm telling you the truth. In this role, there is so many variables to consider and to address. And these things are not the sole responsibility of April Bingham.
In response to questions about plant management, a city spokesperson says the new DPU director, Scott Morris, has taken steps to improve operations, including updating plant staffing shift deployment across key positions, including operations, maintenance, electrical, and engineering.
When you take a look at all the findings that have presented so far, is there anything that you can look at within these reports and say, you know, as the director, I'm going to take accountability for that?
I stand firm as I entered this role as an accomplished professional. I took this role knowing that there would be challenges. I took this role knowing that every day would not be a good day. I took this role knowing that I would have to build relationships and bring in resources needed to be able to accomplish the goals and the missions. And where there were no goals and missions, I had to create some. And so I'm not going to hang my head low on anything that I've not done, because what I did do, it needed to be done at that time. One could say that I ran out of time because there was so much that needed to be done.
And so, going back to the question, your answer would be no.
No, I think I have served the city of Richmond, especially the Department of Public Utilities, wholeheartedly. I hold my head high, knowing that I did the best that I could at the time that I had available to me, and I hold no regrets.
In the event of a power outage at the Richmond Water Treatment Plant, batteries called uninterruptible power supplies, or UPSs, were supposed to cut on and power the plant. But according to this assessment from a third-party engineering company hired by the state, on January 6th, the batteries were beyond useful life and they failed immediately. The authors of the report, Short Elliott Hendrickson, or SEH, said DPU's lack of testing and verification of that UPS system was the cause of the water crisis. State Health Commissioner Dr. Karen Shelton wrote to Governor Glenn Youngkin and Mayor Danny Avula saying that DPU has known for decades that flooding was a risk at the plant, yet the department did not take actions to properly maintain critical backup systems like the batteries. Dwayne Roadcap, who heads up VDH's Office of Drinking Water, addressed the findings of the analysis at a press conference Thursday.
The Department of Public Utilities, both the staff and the management, just accepted that flooding as a normal condition from the older water treatment plant. And they didn't have to accept it.
Operators reported that they knew the UPSs did not work, yet DPU did not address it.
This complacent culture existed where people were reactive, and not until the UPS or the battery backup systems would cause a problem would they react to it.
They also operated in winter mode as a cost-saving measure, meaning the plant only used the overhead main power feed during the winter months, which created a single point of failure in the event of a power outage without adequate redundancy. And they overly relied on manual operation instead of automatic operation. For example, the backup generators were useless in response to the power failure because they required a manual start.
There needs to be more automation at that water treatment plant.
The flooding risk existed because of the way the water treatment plant was designed, as well as changes made since the 1980s. SEH found the location of electrical equipment was vulnerable to flooding. SEH added that, quote, neither consultants nor regulators raised red flags concerning the water treatment plant design limitations over many years, which gave DPU staff the false impression that problematic issues were not urgent to address. Among those regulators, VDH. Roadcap says inspectors in his office do a deep dive inspection at the water treatment plant every 3 years, but his inspectors did not know about previous flooding issues at the plant.
So our inspectors did not identify it.
You're saying that you would have had to see flooding to identify some of these problems. However, you know, what about the winter mode operation that they had going there? What about the lack of upkeep on their parts like the UPS? What about the manual operation of the generators, or the fact that the electrical equipment was located in this basement area? You know, are those things that you feel like your folks should have identified when they went out and did these surveys as problems that needed to be fixed right away?
In hindsight, we're learning from this as well, right? And one of the things that we're revisiting is how we do our inspections and the questions we ask.
VDH will place DPU on a corrective action plan and will monitor their adherence to that plan. The city has made several leadership changes at DPU and brought in 3 now former state employees to work in leadership positions at the Department of Public Utilities. In Richmond, I'm Melissa Hippolyte for CBS 6.